All right, guys, today we're talking all things new construction loans.
You better get fired up.
My man, how you doing, Nate?
What's up? I'm good.
Happy Friday. Happy St. Patty's Day.
That's right. I'm not Irish, but today I'm going to pretend that I am.
We're all a little Irish today. So let's get a new construction. I'll tell you, here locally in Port St. Lucie, if you were to come to me maybe a year ago, 18 months ago, and look for new construction under maybe even 420, there was nothing. There just were zero choices. And I would say maybe the one that would pop up a month, it began instantly, right?
Sure.
And they were 1,500 square feet, no bells and whistles. Now I've got people in the 350 to 4 range that are finding a lot of that new construction in the 350 to 375 range. You can find, I just looked up for a gentleman. He was looking up to 375 and he wanted a 4-bedroom home, not in an HOA, new construction, at least 1,500 square feet. And we had 20 options to send him. So the options are popping up. You're getting a lot of different options. And you can build custom, right? There's a lot of custom builders, depending upon what price point, what kind of quality you want in the area. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit with Nate today on what are the different options I've got as far as lending is concerned when it comes to new construction. So Nate, let's talk about maybe new construction that I'm building from the ground up first, right? So I go to my builder and I say, hey, I want this piece of land, whether it's something I own or it's something that I negotiate on and purchase now, and I want to build a house on it. How does that loan look? And I'm even going to throw in a second question because I get this question all the time. Can I wrap in the lot with it, or does that need to be 2 separate purchases?
Hey, that's a great question. So we actually have lending options for both scenarios where you already own the lot and you want to build something on it, or where you want to acquire the lot and build something on it. So whichever one of those is applicable, we have loan products that can help with that. So let's use the example where you're acquiring the lot at the same time. Okay. So you go to Custom Builder Steve. You say, hey, the corner of this street and this street, there's this lot. I want to buy that lot. I want to build on it. So we would, of course, incorporate Joe Rosen and the Joe Rosen team into the real estate side of that. We would get the lot sorted out. We would put the cost of the lot and the cost of the construction into one loan product, and you would close on that one time upfront.
Gotcha. Okay. So how much down do I need out of pocket, both in my down payment and in my closing costs? And am I paying all that up front?
Yeah, good question. So the minimum down payment on this is going to be a 5% for the one-time construction loan. And it's a minimum FICO or qualifying score of 700 if it's your primary residence. If it's a secondary, you've got to put down 10%. And if it's an investment property, you've got to put down 15%.
Okay. Now, I've seen lenders before, if you're putting down 5%, they've got a fee that you've got to pay in addition to it. It can be wrapped in. And at 10%, there is no fee. Can you talk about that a little bit with your lending options?
So I don't know that there's a difference in the fee. We're looking at just a standard one-time closed construction loan. There are going to be some additional fees that are added in for the construction period. So the underwriting fee is going to be about $1,100, but then there's some other construction fees that are added in that bring the total cost to about $2,400.
But those fees are the same whether I'm at 5 down, 10 down, 20 down. It doesn't matter. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's going to be any changes at all to that, depending on if you're putting down 5, 10, 15.
Perfect. Now, I've seen closing costs a little more expensive for the new construction loans than your typical conventional loan. Would you say that that's accurate or not accurate?
It is a little bit in this case. Like I was saying, the normal underwriting is only $1,100, but when you build in those new construction closing fees on the loan side, it adds another $1,300 up front for sure.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense. All right. So I'm going 10% down, and I usually tell people maybe 4.5% in closing costs, depending upon where you're at price point wise. You think that, okay, I'm getting a head nod. I like that. So let's just say at 10% down, let's go with 5% down. 5% down plus, let's just call it 4% in closing costs. Do I need all 9% on day one?
Yeah, so when you close, it's going to look like any other closing that you've ever been to if you've bought a home before. You're going to go to closing and you're going to sign all the paperwork up front. You sign right then and there. And then depending on the price of the home and the way that it's set up, the builder is going to get draws, whether it's 3 draws, 4 draws, 5 draws from the loan company to go ahead and do the construction. And then at each phase, when they go through the inspection, then they'll go through the next draw and so forth until the end when you get your keys.
And a draw is just the builder getting money from the bank. They're drawing money from the bank so they can start working on more, right? And
Exactly.
the bank doesn't want to give, let's say you're building a $500,000 home and it's on a $100,000 lot. So the whole package is going to be 600 grand. The bank doesn't want to give the builder 600 grand on day one. And it's not just because they're greedy or worried about risk or anything like that. It's the fact that if I'm the bank, I can sit on that money. I can borrow it to people. I can make money on that money. So if I give it to you, I'm not making money on that money. That's what the bank is thinking, right?
Right, exactly. So depending on what the loan amount is, you're going to have different draws, and there's a cost per draw. So just as an example, Joe, if we want to use a say $300,000 house, you're going to have a total of 8 draws actually, and each of those 8 draws is going to cost $290. So that in and of itself is an additional $2,300 in loan cost, right? Because 300 times 8, 2,400. So you're going to be looking at a cost per the draw.
Gotcha.
And the reason that the builder doesn't get all the money up front is just like you said, there's still risk to be mitigated. We want to make sure that the things that are happening instead of giving the builder all the money up front. We have to be responsible and make sure that we're checking in periodically, in this case, 8 times over the course of the construction, to be able to release those funds to them.
Okay. So I want a $500,000 property, let's call it, right? House, but I'll say property because I'm going to go out and let's say I want to shop any lot in Port St. Lucie. There's hundreds of lots. I'm going to pick the lot I want. I'm going to call Bob the seller, who may not even have any type of, in fact, almost assuredly won't have
Right.
any type of relationship with the builder.
Sure.
And I'm going to negotiate with him. Let's say I'm paying 100 grand for easy numbers. And then I go to my favorite builder, Grand Construction, man. I love Grand Construction. And they're going to build me whatever for 400 grand.
Mhm.
So the total package is $500,000. You're telling
Sure.
me I can get a loan 5% down plus let's just call it 4% in closing costs. That's 9%. So I need 45 grand at closing. And then it's going to be roughly 10 to 12 months to build the property. What do my payments look like during that 10 to 12 months?
Sure. So during the construction period, you're paying interest only. So depending what the rate is, what you're borrowing, you're going to be only making interest payments. And then at the end of that loan, there's a modification agreement that you sign that modifies it to the fully amortizing 30-year or 15 or 20, however long you did the loan.
Normal loan.
Converts it at that point, right? So you close one time up front, all the closing costs, everything are due up front. And then the builder essentially has 12 months to finish the construction. And all along, of course, we're checking in to make sure it's happening and we're releasing the funds. And then if you go ahead and close successfully, when I say close, I mean the builder's done their thing and we've gotten the certificate of occupancy within 12 months, you do not need to requalify. You've already closed. So you sign the modification agreement to make that a fully amortizing regular loan. You get your keys and you enjoy your new property.
And guys, one of the cool things about, I should say two of the cool things about these payments is while you are building the property, you're not living in there. So you're probably living, at your current home that you're also paying a mortgage on, or you're renting and you're paying a rental payment. It's really nice to have interest only payments. I can tell you for people who build in that $400,000 to $600,000 range, the typical payments we see at the end, and I'll explain why I'm saying at the end are in that $1,000 to $1,200 range, right? Could be a little bit higher, could be a little bit lower, but that's typically what I'm seeing as those final interest only payments. But here's another really cool thing. They're only charging you, we'll say charging you interest only payments every month on what you've drawn. So if you've only drawn 20, 30% of the loan, then that first month interest only payment will be roughly 20 to 30% of your final interest only payment, right? So you're not paying, let's just say it's $1,200. You're not paying that $1,200 every single month. You're paying that the last maybe 2 or 3 months. And in the middle, you're paying less. And in the beginning, you're paying even less, right? So it really helps when you're also renting or you own another property and you're trying to keep that monthly payment down. So I think that is something really cool that a lot of people don't understand. And then at the end, boom, it turns into a normal loan, just like any other loan you would have. Now, Nate, talk to me. We've got a lot of veterans here locally. They're always wanting to know what their VA options are. If I'm a veteran, which I am, and I want to build new construction, use a VA construction loan. A, is that a thing? And B, how does it differ?
Yeah, it absolutely does. It's a thing. So, with the VA construction loan, the only major difference is that you're not going to have to make any interest payments at all throughout the loan process. It's going to look more or less the same, though. At the end of the construction period, if you've been able to get the final product within the 12-month period, the builder has you sign a modification agreement to make it a full VA backed loan, and you get your keys.
Am I putting down the 5% still, or because it's VA, am I able to do 0%?
Good question. I haven't had a ton of experience with the VA side. I believe that you still have the 5% down, but I will comment in the notes here, or I'll make a note in the comments if I'm incorrect about that.
I appreciate that. Okay. So that all sounds good. I think we've hit up everything with that. Now let's talk a little bit about a spec house. What's a spec house? First of all, a spec house is a house that a builder is building whether a buyer buys it or not. It might be on day one of the build. It might be mid-build. It might have already been built, and maybe it's been sitting there for 6 to 12 months, right? But it's never been lived in. That's a spec house, right? Whether I've got a buyer or not, I, as the builder, I'm going to build that house. Whereas a custom house is only going to be built if I secure, as a builder, I secure that buyer. The buyer agrees to all the terms and the number and everything else and signs off. Then I will build that custom home. That's the difference between a spec and a new custom build. So with a spec, talk to me a little bit about what that loan looks like, and does it differ at all?
That's just going to be your regular loan. So the only difference with a spec home and a resale loan is that nobody's lived in the house before, but it's going to be exactly the same. When you think about the final product after you've done your custom home and you get the keys, you're walking into essentially the same thing. It's a brand new home, hasn't been lived in, just got finished being built potentially, and you're just acquiring the property. So the difference between purchasing a spec home and a construction product is that you're building out the home and waiting 12 months or less. With a spec home, it's already built, like you said. You partner with Joe Rosen. He brings you to the property. You say, this is the one. You go under contract. You sign, you close. It's all done at the end. You get your keys and you live there.
Yeah. So guys, you got some pros and cons to specs, right? One of the pros is the credit score that you need is not as high. On that construction loan, you said what, Nate? 700?
700 minimum. That's right.
700, right? But on a conventional or an FHA loan, what do I need?
So on an FHA loan, for you to have the minimum 3.5% down, it's 580. If you have less than a 580, you have to put 10% down. And on a conventional loan, if it's your first home, you've never owned a home before, or you're classified as a new home buyer or a first-time home buyer, it's only 3% down.
Yep. And we've shared this in other videos, but guys, if you've got below a 580, it does not take as much time as you might think to get it to 580, right?
Sure.
To get you from 5 to 580 is way easier than getting you from 7 to 780.
Sure.
And there's things, common things that we can get done to help you with that. So if you're in that position, don't just say, hey, I'm going to keep renting and paying off my landlord's mortgage. Call Nate, and he's never going to say no. He's going to say, we can't right now, but if you do A, B, and C, it might take 30 days, 60 days, whatever it is, and we can get you up to that number that you need. So I think that's an important distinction to make. But guys, if you go after a spec, you can get that property. You're not making those monthly interest-only payments. That's a pro, right? A con is you don't get to be particular with the home, okay? I will say if you found it in the first, say, month, 2 months, and they haven't gone in and put the countertops in or the cabinets, depending on the builder, the bigger the builder, the less chance there is of this, in my experience. But depending upon the builder, you can come in and say, I know you're putting granite in this home, but I'd really like quartz, and I'd really like this quartz. And they might say, sure. They might say, sure, but That costs us $1,200 more, so we got to add $1,200 to the price, or you've got to go pay that company $1,200, and then we'll keep the price the same, or whatever it is. But you're going to have to figure out how to make that happen, and you've got to find a builder who says yes to that. So your ability to customize the home is either zero or it's less than what you'd be able to do on a custom home. The other challenge you're going to have is if you find a spec, let's say it's a 10-month build, and they're on month 3. And you're like, ooh, I want it, but it's 7 months away. You can go get a normal loan, which is awesome. All the terms, in my opinion, are more favorable. But Nate, can I lock that loan today if I'm 7 months out?
Yeah, you can lock it today.
Okay, I was going to say I didn't think you could. So you can lock 7 months out.
Yep.
And I will get today's rates.
Yes, and then if down the road, when you finally take possession of the property,
my next question.
Yep. If rates are better, if terms are more favorable, then there's an opportunity for you to modify that as well with our lender, that you can get that better rate and you can get those better terms.
So guys, whatever rates are, let's say they're 6.5%, right? And you go in, you get a 6.5% loan today with Nate, but it doesn't close for 7 months, right? And rates in 7 months are 7.5%. They went up. No worries. You're locked in at 6.5%. You're good to go. If the opposite happens, rates go down to 5.5%, but you locked in at 6.5%. What Nate is saying is you can now opt for that 5.5% rate. I assume you got to pay for that. Is that correct?
There is a modification cost, yeah, because you closed, if you remember, you fully closed up front.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a modification cost that goes into it, but it's going to pale in comparison to what you're going to save in interest.
On a spec home, you're not going to close up front. You're closing in 7 months, right?
Yep.
Okay. So when you close in 7 months, how much roughly? Let's say today you told me 6.5%, but in 7 months it drops to 5.5%. How much is it going to cost me roughly? Are we talking $200, $300, $400, $500, or are we talking like $2, $300, $400, $5,000?
It's closer to the former. I don't know exactly how much it's going to be because it's going to vary lender to lender, but it's hundreds versus thousands.
Okay. And who wouldn't do that, right? That's
right.
Yeah. That okay. So we were talking about I'm getting a little off track. Is there anything you want to talk about with new construction? If not, there's one more thing I want to talk about.
No, I've answered all the questions that you've asked about it, unless you had some other stuff.
No, those are the big ones. And guys, I'll tell you from experience, you want to work with a lender who's done new construction loans before. I've worked with some who have, I've worked with some who haven't. And I'll tell you, there is a huge difference with the experience levels on their ability to get it done, their ability to get it done on time. And you want them to have a great relationship with your builder. If your builder loves you, I've seen builders give little upgrades for free. I've seen builders get the job done quicker because they get their guys on there. I've seen all kinds of things. If your lender's a pain in the butt, they're going to view you as a pain in the butt, whether it's fair or not. People are people. They've got emotions. And I've seen things magically take longer. I've seen zero additional upgrades other than, which should be expected. But sometimes if you're nice, you get little perks. So if you've got a great lender, you're probably going to have a much better experience, especially when it comes to new construction. Now, Nate, last thing I want to talk about, and again, this is no way related to new construction, although it could be, is you and I were working with a client the other day who, I forget what their limit is, but let's say it was $400,000 is what they were approved for. And everything they were looking at, of course, was 410, right? And I said, buddy, you're at 400, so, and he wanted closing costs. Now I'm remembering who it was. So not only are you trying to negotiate 10 grand down, but you're also asking them for another, let's say $12,000 in closing costs. We're talking $20,000, $25,000. It's not that kind of market to be able to do that. Certainly not at that price point.
Sure.
And your comment was, well, if we're going to get closing costs, we'll just do a rate buy down, and that will allow him to probably afford the 410 depending upon the numbers. So talk a little bit about that and how impactful that would be to someone who's right up against what they can afford.
Sure. So if we're looking at, say, a lump sum of $5,000, $10,000 that you're getting in seller paid concessions.
So guys, just to explain what that is, the seller is agreeing to pay you, the buyer, not pay you, to cover $5,000 to $10,000, and it can be any negotiated number, worth of your closing costs. Okay. And every loan has different rules on what the seller can give to cover your closing costs. I just want
That's
to,
right.
I want to throw that out there.
Yeah, good caveat. I like that. Seller coverage disclaimer. So if you're getting $5,000 or $10,000 in seller credit, the logical thing for most people is to take that and to either apply that toward closing costs or to put that down to change their loan amount.
Yeah.
But the reality is that if you take that money and you apply it toward your down payment, it's not really going to change your payment that much. A $5,000 or $10,000 difference in loan amount, we're talking about $50 to $100, maybe. But for you to be able to qualify for much more house, you take that same $5,000 or $10,000, and what you can do is called a permanent rate buy down. So if the offered rate right now is say 7%, and for $7,500, I can get that 7% down to a 6%, then that's literally 1% difference
For the
in
life
the
of the
interest
loan.
rate. Yeah, and that could potentially be hundreds of dollars for the entire life of the loan.
Yep.
So you don't have to use all of it for the rate buy down, right? In the example that I gave, if you get 10,000, you use 7,500 to buy your rate down. You still have 2,500 that I would just put toward closing costs. So that saves $2,500 in your pocket day of closing.
And so tell me, on a conventional, how much can I ask for from the seller to cover my closing costs?
On a that's a good question. So on a standard conventional loan, if you're putting down 10% or less, it's going to be 3%. If you're putting down 10% or more, it could be 6%. If you're putting down 25 or 20 to 25%, I'm not 100% sure on the percentages, but it could go up to 9%. But for the average, most people are looking at a 3%.
What am I at on FHA?
FHA, you start at 6%, you stay at 6%.
Okay, so guys, 6%. So here's what I'm thinking. If you guys have, I don't want to say no, but either no or little cash, and closing costs on a $400,000 home probably hover around 3.5% to 4%. Let's just say 3.5% for easy numbers. So 2.5%, if you can negotiate from that seller to cover 6% of closing costs, which Nate, the lender, will allow, because that's your cap, 6%.
Yep.
You can use that other 2.5%, which on a $400,000 property, that's 10 grand. You can use that 10 grand, and rate buy downs are considered closing costs. Pretty much anything that you can include, you can use that money for, right?
Yep.
So now you can use it to pay down your rate. Now there are other, man, I'm really getting off topic today, but I think this is so important right now because people are trying to find any way to get that amount that they're pre-approved for up 5, 10, 15 grand, whatever it is. And I'll tell you why I think it's happening. And I can only speak for the bubble that I'm in, but I'm seeing a lot of people who for the last year, 2 years, 3 years, the market was so crazy that if you weren't cash or conventional, or you wanted it, you took an inspection out of your offer, or you weren't putting guaranteed escrow deposit down. So if you back out for any reason, you lose your 5, 10, 20 grand, whatever it is. Or you were asking, if you were asking for closing costs, you were not getting it. You were not getting it. So you had a lot of what I would call average everyday people, right? The majority of your first-time home buyers, even second-time home buyers, but the heart of your market not doing it, not buying homes because they thought, man, I need help with cash, or get an FHA loan, or whatever the issue is, right?
Yeah.
Well, now that the market has softened a little bit, I just put out inventory rates for Port St. Lucie today. I always say 4 to 6 months is about a neutral market. And at the peak of our market, we were at 90 days of inventory, which is crazy, right? No inventory. Well, now we're up to 3.2 months. Not quite a neutral market, but it's getting there, right? So buyers now have the ability, not every time, but the ability to ask for some seller paid closing costs and get this done. You've also got 2-1 buy downs. The other day I saw a 3-2-1 buy down.
Yep.
You can make up any buy down you want. And essentially let's talk about a 2-1 buy down, because that's the popular one right now.
Sure.
A 2-1 buy down is for the first year, we're cutting your rate down 2%. The seller is paying for that.
Right.
That's not necessarily true. The buyer could pay for it too.
The
What?
seller
Tell me.
pays for it.
Okay, so the buyer cannot pay for a 2-1 buy down?
No, it's got to be the seller or another interested party. So on a 2-1 buy down, you're going in at a fixed rate. So I'm going in today, Joe. My rate is 7% as an example. I have a 7% rate, but for year one, I get to take that down 2%. So I'm making payments personally.
I know why. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm making payments personally at a 5%.
Yep.
But the lender still wants their 7%. So that 2% is subsidized by the seller. And
I gotcha.
And what happens is it's paid up front and it's put into escrow. And so my servicer, whoever my company is that I make my payments to, has an escrow account set up for my taxes and my insurance already. But now they've also got this lump sum from the seller. So they just use that.
Yes.
Kick in the other 2%.
To make a partial payment. Yeah. So guys, I want to back it up a little bit. And I want to talk about a rate drop for the life of the loan versus what I'm talking about, which is a 2-1 buy down, right?
Yeah.
So on a 2-1, let's again use that 7%. On a life of the loan rate drop, I'm going to pay money, and I can pay for that. The seller can pay for that, whatever.
Yep.
And that will drop my rate from 7 to whatever. In this example, let's say 6%. And I'm going to pay whatever Nate tells. And Nate will tell you, hey, you want to drop a 1/4 point? This is what it costs. You want to drop a 1/2 point? This is what it costs. Nate will also tell you, if you live there for this amount of time or less, it doesn't make mathematical sense. If you live there for this amount of time or more, you'll actually save money and it makes sense to do it. And then you just look at that timeline and say, well, I lived there that amount of time or not. And it either makes sense or it doesn't. But that is an actual rate reduction.
Yes.
Right? When you do a 2-1 buy down, it's what you're doing is you're dropping, let's again take the 7%. The first year you're dropping it to 5%. And you're making payments as if it was 5%. On the second year, it's a 2-1, right? So on the second year, you're paying as if it was a 1% drop, right? So from 7 to 6.
Yeah.
And then the third year on, you're back to the full 7%, right? So it's a short-term help for you, but you're not actually reducing your rate. It's still 7% with the bank. The bank's looking at it. The lender's looking at it like it's a 7% loan. But the bank is doing the math to say, okay, if the buyer had a 5% loan, what would that payment be versus what is it actually at 7%? And whatever that difference is, they're going to charge the seller that amount. Right. And then they're going to do the same math on that second year with a 1% buy down. Yep. And then they're going to take all that money from the seller and put it into an account. Now that is generally, correct me if I'm wrong, that is generally going to be more affordable for the seller than dropping that buyer's rate by 1% for the life of the loan, correct?
It is generally, yeah. It comes out to be somewhere between 2.25% and maybe 2 3/4% in seller concessions that they end up kicking in for the 2-1 or the 3-2-1.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, guys, hopefully we confused the hell out of you. This was a lot of great information. And I know it's a lot, right? That's why I have Nate on every third Friday of the month, because lending is one of the tougher, more complex parts of a transaction. And everybody's got different products. There's so many different rules depending upon whether you're VA, FHA, conventional. Mm-hmm. Now we're talking about new construction today, which is a completely different animal. Yeah. And so really, what I would want, what I'm sure you guys want, is not a salesman really trying to push you to purchase something. You want someone who's going to educate you first, make you feel confident about what it is you're doing so you fully know all your options, and then it's your decision to move forward. That's what everybody wants. Yeah. And that's what guys like Nate are going to give you. So, Nate, I appreciate you coming in today. Thank you so much, especially on St. Patty's Day. And I hope you guys have a phenomenal weekend.